Okay, I'd like to introduce Mark Douglas. Mark is best known for his books, probably The Disciplined Trader and my favorite, Trading in the Zone, which I had the privilege of writing the foreword for. I have to tell you, Mark's book, Trading in the Zone, really had a big impact on me because it deals with the mental aspect of trading. You can also find out more about Mark's products at markdouglas.com. So here he is, Mark Douglas.
A lot of familiar faces. I'm just getting in front of the room. I'm kind of amazed, actually, how many people I recognize. It's pretty nice. What's that? What? You have to get the microphone volume turned up? Oh, you can't. You couldn't hear me just then? Really? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Oh, well, first of all, I don't think this microphone is on for you. This microphone is on for that back there. So I don't actually have a microphone. This is not amplifying my voice. So if I'm not talking loud enough, just let me know. Normally I talk loud enough. I don't know why I maybe started out. So anyway, but anyway, it's nice to be here. It really is. It's nice to be. I flew in from Scottsdale, Arizona, and who read the paper today? Who read the Orlando paper? Nobody read the paper this morning? You did? Only one person? Yeah, there's an article actually in the Orlando paper about middle way through the front section talking about how hot it is in Arizona right now, or at least in Phoenix. People don't seem to believe just how hot it gets there, but I'm telling you, it really gets hot. It's like, how many people had the heat on last night in their room? I'm not kidding. I'm really not. Last week we had temperatures up to, if the news stations report the temperatures of being 116, that means there were 118 to 120. And we set a record last Monday for the highest low temperature in Arizona recorded history. It didn't get below 96 degrees. That was our low of the day, 96 degrees. Now, not to take anything away from Arizona weather, because 8 months out of the year, it couldn't be more heavenly in Arizona. I mean, the weather is absolutely spectacular, but we do pay for it. We pay for it this time of the year. And so, if you're interested in coming out to Arizona, I would definitely suggest it, late October through maybe April, but otherwise, this time of the year, be prepared for some really unbelievable temperatures. But this is what we need right here. We need this rain because we're in a really severe drought. But anyway, enough about Arizona. You guys want to know about trading, right? Trading psychology, more specifically. What I'm gonna talk about is the psychology behind creating consistency in your trading. And an interesting thing that I found even about 3 weeks ago, I did a presentation in Toronto, and there were probably about 100 people in the room, and I was really kind of amazed at how many people really didn't have a definition of what consistency was. Just think about it for a second. That they really didn't know, what does it mean to really create consistency? Like when I asked the question to the audience, nobody really could answer the question. What is consistency? I mean, if you're going to create it, if it's something that you're going to manifest in your life, I mean, or in your trading, it certainly has to be something that you know what it means. You have to know the parameters of it. And I'm just going to simply define consistency as, as a nice, steadily rising equity curve. That's all. Just a nice, steadily rising equity curve, okay? At a nice, say, 45-degree angle. Will that equity curve have any drawdowns? Yeah. But what kind of drawdowns? Small drawdowns. Small drawdowns that reflect any trading system or methodology or any particular way in which you decide to trade, the kind of losses that you will experience as a result of being a trader. It's a natural part of the business that we will have small drawdowns. But what isn't consistency are the kind of, let's say, a kind of equity curve that looks like this, with a huge drawdown, and build it right back up again, another huge drawdown, build it back up, and another huge drawdown. Now, most traders who don't understand the nature of trading or the nature of the psychology behind what it means to be consistent, they will attribute these huge drawdowns to something that happened in the market. They'll always try to find a reason to determine what is it about what the market did on this particular day or in this particular trade or whatever series of trades created this huge drawdown that caused that to happen. And then go on a search to find what it is. What I'm going to establish, hopefully today in the next 2 hours, is that those huge drawdowns are not the result of something you did not know about the market. They are not the result of something you did not know about the market. They are the result of something you didn't know about yourself. And there are ways to prevent that. And those ways to prevent it are what it means to really create a nice, steadily rising equity curve. And those ways basically fall into 4 general categories. None of this is, by the way, none of this material is in that book. So there's no point in looking. I just didn't want you to waste your time. There's no material in the book. You've got the videotape. I mean, come on. So you just need to sit back and listen. Anyway, so we got 4 basic categories. One is that you have to have an edge. In other words, you have to know enough about the nature of the market and how it moves so that you can determine when there's a higher probability of one thing happening over another. That's how I'm defining an edge. When there's a higher probability of one thing happening over another. And then the next category is that you have to learn how to think in the market's perspective. I just simply, as a heading, would say that you have to learn how to think in probabilities. Now this is really can be a, this is really kind of where most traders have their, let's say, have the greatest amount of difficulty. And first, in recognizing what it is, what it means to think in probabilities, and then once they recognize it, implementing some process or series of steps where they're actually retraining their mind to think in probabilities. Now, this is what I'm going to spend most of the time on in the next 2 hours. And just before I even get into it, just so you kind of have a little bit of a background, is that our minds do not naturally think that way. Our minds don't naturally process information in a way that will cause us to, let's say, be in harmony with or have, let's say, be in correspondence with the nature of the way the market exists. And so we have to do something very specific to train our minds to think in probabilities if we want to create consistency. The third category is all the, let's say, conflicting energy that exists inside of us. I'm saying conflicting energy, conflicting beliefs, or whatever that would argue against us accumulating vast sums of money as a trader. Now, what kind of things am I talking about? Anybody have any ideas of what I might be talking about?
Just a general belief system.
A general belief system. What's that? Go ahead.
Say a general belief system maybe from childhood.
A general belief system about childhood, but can you think of anything specific?
Self-doubt.
Self-doubt? Well, okay, but anything more specific than that even?
Filthy rich.
Filthy rich. Now look at the word filthy and rich, okay? Where does that word filthy come from? It can come from a number of different sources, but what people have to understand is that we grow up. We can grow up. We don't say we do grow up. We can grow up with any number of things that we've learned throughout our lives that are going to fall into the category of what I'm going to just say are self-sabotaging beliefs. In many cases, they're religious-based beliefs. Because essentially, as traders, what are we doing? We're basically taking money from other people with no services rendered. That's basically what we're doing as traders. And there are a lot of religious beliefs that let's say that would really rail against the idea of doing something like taking money away from other people with no services rendered. And so as a result of, we build up our skills, we build up our knowledge about the nature of trading, we get better and better at it, and all of a sudden find ourselves, or maybe not in the moment find ourselves, but back when we look back and with a little bit of introspection and say, why did this happen? We make trading errors. Errors that cause these kinds of drawdowns. Sometimes it can be simple ones. Like even a buy for a sell. I did it just the other day. It didn't create a huge loss because I caught it, but the point is that if I wasn't conscious of what I was doing and why I was doing it in the moment, I could have very easily let that trade go, and it could have been more than what I anticipated. And the problem is that when we experience these kind of drawdowns, they create psychological damage. They create the kind of psychological damage that's very difficult to recover from. Or it can be difficult depending on one's skill level and being able to do so. And what kind of psychological damage am I talking about? The lack of self-trust. We don't trust ourselves anymore. And when we don't trust ourselves to do what we need to do when we need to do it without any reservation, without any hesitation, what ends up happening is that we end up generating fear. And what we're going to find out in a little bit is that fear has a very insidious effect on our ability to be objective and see what the market is offering us in any given moment. Because we can define the market as this kind of never-ending opportunity flow. And the market's just basically giving us an opportunity in any given moment to get in, add to, detract from, or get out. But it's this never-ending flow. Now, if we're not perceiving it as this never-ending flow, the market's not causing us to perceive it that way. It's what's going on inside of us that's causing us to perceive it as something other than this never-ending opportunity flow. And those are the kinds of internal forces that cause these kind of drawdowns. That's the third area. The fourth area is learning, let's say, building a specific kind of mental framework that will allow you to recognize when you've crossed through the threshold of euphoria, so let's say from normal confidence to overconfidence, or from normal confidence to a state of euphoria. In other words, there is what I'm going to call a psychological threshold. Below this threshold, you're just confident. Once you pass through it, you're in a state of euphoria. And why would being in a state of euphoria be a problem? What's that? Loss of objectivity. Anything else? Feeling invincible. Why is feeling invincible a problem when you're interacting with the market? Everybody understands the implications? In other words, when you've crossed the threshold into a state of mind of euphoria, it is impossible to perceive risk. That is the nature of euphoria. In other words, the nature of euphoria is that from our individual perspective, from the perspective of our state of mind, in that state of mind, it would be impossible for me to perceive that anything can happen other than what I expect to happen. Anything. The only thing that's going to happen is what I expect to happen. And as a result of being so absolutely sure that what I expect to happen is going to happen, what would be the next step in this process? To break my money management rules, right? In other words, to put on a position that would be much larger than what I would normally trade. Maybe 10 times, maybe 20. Well, there's no risk. Why not? Right? Why not? Now, the problem, of course, with putting on an inordinately large position is that it doesn't take very much movement for the market to put you to put you in a huge losing trade. And the problem there is that if I've got this huge position on with being absolutely positive that it's going to work, and then the market just goes against me by just a little bit, I can go from this state of euphoria, from this state of, let's say, in essence, heaven on earth, to a state of extreme agony and pain of hell on earth virtually instantaneously. Can I not? And then once I get into this state of mind right here, I will be in mind freeze. My mind will freeze up. I'll be, let's say, paralyzed to do anything, and I just sit and watch as the market takes my money away. until something snaps inside of my mind, so okay, that's enough, and I get out. And then I look back at my equity and I see one of these huge drawdowns, okay, and I think, oh my God, how did that happen? Now, if you don't understand the underlying dynamics of what I've just talked about, you're gonna go look at the market, and you're gonna try to find what happened in the market that caused that. What set of variables, what set of market variables caused that to happen? You see, the market didn't have anything to do with it. Nothing. To create consistency, in essence, what we have to do is learn how to trade without making errors. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? But then what is a trading error? Okay, if that's the case, everyone say, did everyone nod their head? Yes, yes, okay. We're not, okay, it makes sense, right? To create consistency, I have to reach higher and higher levels of error-free trading, right? There's a correlation there. In other words, everyone sees the correlation, right? But then if I said, okay, what are trading errors? List them. What? Not following your rules is a trading error. Okay, good. See, but these are things you should be able to, whoa, well, right off the top of your head, right? You guys are all in the business of trading. Every single one of you would probably say, yes, my goal is to create consistent results. If I said, what do you want? What's your objective? What are you trying to accomplish here? Well, I want consistency. And yet if we just established that consistency is a function of the lack of errors, you should be able to rattle off those errors right off the top of your head so that you can recognize them when you're making them. Right? What's the biggest error that virtually all traders make, except for the ones who have gotten to the point where they don't make them anymore? What's the biggest number one error that traders make? What? Nope. I know I'm right. Okay. Yeah, and so but see, I know I'm right, but how does I know I'm right manifest itself? Into a trading error. What?
Not exiting so that you can take what you see as the next correct signal, and you can't take it because you're locked in the wrong position and you did not exit.
I would agree with everything he said. I'm just going to say it a little bit differently. What's that? Yeah, not predefining your risk. Everything we just said, I'm just going to say it a little bit differently, not predefining your risk. Now, I'm not going to ask people to raise their hands, but I bet there are people in this room who still will get into a trade without predefining their risk. Now, why won't people predefine their risk? Why is that so hard to do? Why do you think that's so hard to do? What do you think of the underlying dynamics are? Well, yeah, you don't want to be wrong. Now, see, when you've learned to think in probabilities, what you're going to learn, what you're going to understand, is that trading is not a right or wrong endeavor. It has nothing to do with being right or wrong. But this is really important. Yes, we don't want to be wrong, and we don't want to lose money. And there's a problem here in terms of the way our minds are designed to think. If I think of trading, getting into a trade, as being something I can be right or wrong about, and I have not accepted the risk, meaning I have not accepted the dollar value of the potential loss that I can incur from that trade by not predefining it, or by predefining it still not accepting it, then my mind has the potential to associate whatever's happening in the market now with something that's happened in my past. Meaning our minds are wired to associate. Meaning that if I haven't changed the way that I think about trading, I have the potential to look at any given trade as, well, let's say any given trade has the potential to tap me into the accumulated emotional pain of what it means to be wrong, or every time I've been wrong in my life.
Personalized.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to say that again. If I haven't redefined trading to think about it in the appropriate way based on the way that I'm going to explain in a moment, being wrong on a trade has the potential to tap me into the accumulated pain of every time I've been wrong in my life, because that's the way our minds are designed to think. They're designed to associate. So if that's the case, little wonder that I'm going to avoid predefining my risk. Because here's what's going to happen. For me to predefine my risk, see, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to be in that state of pain. For me to predefine my risk, what do I have to do? I have to gather evidence that will suggest why this trade might not work. right? I have to gather evidence to say, okay, what are the things that could happen that would tell me, or what does the market have to look like, sound like, or feel like to tell me this trade isn't working? And I have to gather evidence to tell me that so that I know how to recognize it. But the problem is if I gather too much evidence, I might talk myself out of the trade, right? And if I talk myself out of the trade and it turns out to be a winner, then I could be in a state of agony that might be even greater than had I put the trade on and it turned out to be a loser. So how do I compensate? So I've got a mental dilemma here. I've got a dilemma. How do I resolve the dilemma? Gather enough evidence, in other words, have the trade be so technically or fundamentally sound, whatever method you might use, to the point where I have convinced myself that I'm right. And see, if I'm right, there's no risk. Right? Why predefine the risk if I'm right? There is no risk. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I was right.
That's an implicit risk.
What's that?
Not doing has an implicit risk in it.
I'm still, there's people, go ahead, say that again.
Not doing still has an implicit risk that you don't associate it with.
Yeah.
Not doing something has an implicit risk in not doing something.
Right.
And that is also a risk that
Right.
they're normally associated as a risk. Inaction. Inaction is a risk, actually. Fear.
Go ahead.
I think part of your belief system kicks in. Hope is something we are trained to have. We always look forward, hoping things will be better. So when I'm wrong, that fellow jumps off there and says, "Don't worry about it. Go like this."
I know exactly. I'm going to give you an example that really that typifies exactly what you're saying. And see, here's the thing. Here's the problem with trading. I'm just going to put up some typical errors that we make over and over again all the time. Let's see if we can we, how do we need to adjust it? Go forward or back? Oh, I'll just move it up a little bit. Anyway, here's what's interesting about these errors. Okay, one, hesitate, get in too late, jump the gun, get in too soon. Don't define your risk in advance of putting out a trade. Define your risk. Don't take your loss and it turns out to be a bigger loss. Get out of a winning trade too soon. Leave money on the table. Get out of a winning trade. Let a winning trade turn into lose without having taken any profits. Move a stop closer to your entry point. Get stopped out, and the market trades back in your favor. Now, here's what's really interesting about trading, and the biggest one, like I said, the biggest one is that not predefining your risk, and that I just went through the whole dilemma of the psychological dynamics behind that. Did everybody understand that dilemma? Go ahead.
Could you just restate, you said being wrong has the potential of?
Tapping you into the accumulated pain of every time you've been wrong in your life. And that's definitely something we're going to avoid. Our minds will automatically alter the way we perceive the market to help us avoid that from that happening, okay? Now, I'll explain the underlying dynamics of that in a second. But there's a real important point that I want to make here, is that these are all trading errors. Will everybody at least acknowledge they're all trading errors? I mean, are we all together on this? Okay? However, here's what's really interesting about trading and why it can be so difficult to create consistent success is because you can make every single one of those errors over and over again and still find yourself in a winning trade. You don't have to know. Yeah, right. the microphone didn't pick up, but someone back there said, "Thank God." Now think about the nature of trading. What skills do you need to find yourself in a winning trade?
Consistency.
What? No. What skills do you need to find yourself in a winning trade? None. Zero. Think about that. You don't need to know anything to find yourself in a winning trade. Right? Nothing. You don't have to have any skills whatsoever. And if you can find yourself in a winning trade without having any skills whatsoever, once, can it happen again? And can it happen again? Yeah, it can. We don't know what the limit is to how many times it can happen without having any knowledge whatsoever. What do you need to know to find yourself with a winning blackjack hand? Nothing. What do you need to know about roulette? Nothing. What do you need to know about craps? Nothing. What does that suggest to you? Do you see any correlations here? Do you see any correlations? What does that suggest to you about the nature of trading? It's gambling. Absolutely. Now, interestingly enough, when I proposed this in Toronto 3 weeks ago, they really railed against it. Oh, you would not believe how difficult it was for them to wrap their mind around the idea that trading was gambling.
Not very religious statement.
What's that?
Not a very religious statement.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly enough, to really be consistent, to create consistent results, you have to acquire a mindset that is really consistent with the kind of mindset that a good, not a compulsive gambler, but a professional gambler would have, or the kind of mindset that the casinos have.
Is that your average living in Las Vegas?
I don't know. I mean, because look at it. What do the casinos do? They spend billions of dollars building these grandiose hotels. They have to, think about this. They have to justify spending that kind of money. They spend billions of dollars, building these grand hotels to attract people into playing an event, wagering on an event that all of us know has a random outcome. And yet they create consistent results for themselves. There's a reason why. It's because they think about it in the appropriate way. As traders, if you can learn to think about this in the appropriate way, you can become the casino. Because your technical analysis will put the edge in your favor. You will get an edge. But if you can't use that edge appropriately, meaning that if you consistently make these errors or any other type of errors, you will not create consistent results. You will create random results. And the problem with creating random results, even though it can be a lot of fun, because you can end up on huge winning streaks. Because keep in mind, you can make every single one of those errors and still end up in a winning trade. You can be the best analyst in the world or the worst analyst in the world. You can have the best reasons or the worst reasons. It doesn't make any difference. You can still end up in a winning trade. But as long as you're susceptible, as long as you're susceptible to this, okay? As long as you're susceptible to these huge drawdowns, you are creating accumulated psychological damage that will have an enormous impact on your ability to make consistent money. Eventually what will happen is if you don't understand the underlying dynamics of these drawdowns from trading randomly, you'll end up with typically analysis paralysis. You'll become an incredible market analyst and the inability to take advantage of what you perceive as an opportunity. You won't be able to put your trades on. And you'll see the gap between what you know, what you understand, what you've learned about in terms of opportunities, and your bottom line results grow ever wider and wider and wider. So are we kind of ready to get to the way we need to think to, you know, if I kind of set this up all right for you guys? So where do we want to go? What do you guys want to know now? What?
I used to go to Vegas for 13 years with the shopping center convention.
With, you say the shopping center convention? Okay.
I never put one nickel I never gambled the entire time I've been trading full-time for 6 years, putting much more than a nickel in. Is there something really sick about me, or
Sick? No,
maybe I get this answer later?
well, no, I'm going to say no. I don't see the correlation between why you think because you went to Vegas and didn't gamble. I mean, why you think. I mean, I can think of
That's
things.
gambling. This is not to me.
Yeah, well, the sooner you think about this, what I'm saying to you now is that the sooner you think about this as gambling, the easier it'll be to create consistent results.
I already have.
Well, great. Yeah, if you know, so why would you say that there was? Why do you think that there was some sort of sick implication then?
Well, because I was afraid of the risk of gambling in Las Vegas, but I'm not afraid of the risk of trading.
Okay. If you've accepted the risk, that's one of the key issues right there. One of the reasons why people have such a difficult time and make these errors is because they have not accepted the risk. If you've truly, and what does it mean to accept something? Because he's bringing up a really good point. What does it mean to accept something? What is the definition of true acceptance?
You don't have to control it anymore, you can let it go.
Well, I understand where the not control comment comes from, and let it go. I'm not going to argue with either one of those statements, other than to say that the way I define acceptance is that when you've really accepted something, you've reconciled it, meaning to the point, reconciled it where there's no potential for anything else inside of you, meaning inside your mental environment, any belief that you've ever acquired to argue against what it is that you've accepted. There is no conflicting energy. Not something you have to rationalize away or justify or anything else. True acceptance means there's no conflicting energy. And essentially, as traders, of course, what we have to do is get to the point where we've accepted the risk of trading with no conflicting energy. Because if there's anything else inside of us that argues against what it is that we're doing, for whatever reason, it will create some degree of fear, and to whatever degree of fear that we're operating out of, will narrow our focus of attention and take us out of a state of objectivity, or let's say take us out of this constant opportunity flow that the market's offering us. We'll be further and further away from that flow. So what we have to do is learn to train, or what we have to do is step into a process of training our minds to think in probabilities. Now, what exactly does that mean? How do we know that the market exists from a probabilistic perspective? How do we know that it's even gambling in the first place, based on however it is that we're going to define gambling? Isn't gambling, let's say, an event, a game that has a random outcome? Does trading have a random outcome? So there's no difference, is there? And how do we know that trading has a random outcome? How do we know that whatever particular way that you might define your edge, meaning whatever methodology you use to determine this is a time to buy and this is a time to sell, or vice versa, or this is a time to get in, this is a time to get out, this is a time to take profits, this is a time to add to or detract from your position. Whatever that is, how do we know? How do we know for an absolute fact that there's a random outcome?
It's not a guaranteed result,
Yeah, but how do you know that?
because the market moves after you get out.
Understandably, yes, the market moves, and what's creating that movement?
No, you, the randomness.
No, well, no, but what's creating the movement?
Buyers and sellers.
Other buyers and sellers, right? So if you decide to buy at this point right here, what is now required for you to find yourself in a winning trade?
Sell.
No, what's that? Yeah, there has to be more buyers, right? Someone has to be willing to bid the price up further. What's that? Yeah, someone has to be willing to bid the price up further. If you buy, someone has to buy after you. If you sell, someone has to sell after you. If those people aren't there, then you're not gonna find yourself in a winning trade. It's that simple. If those people aren't there, you were the last buyer, right? At least in that time frame. In that time frame, you were the last buyer. What else can happen to determine, regardless of what our edge is, that we might not find ourselves in a winning trade?
News.
What? No, not new. No, just really fundamental. Just really fundamental. I'm just getting what it takes for you to find yourself in a winning trade. Someone has to buy or sell after you. What else can happen? The opposite.
Somebody bigger than you comes in and buys a lot more than
You could be a buyer and some huge seller comes into the market, right? So in essence, I'm going to make the statement that it only takes one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your edge. Theoretically, usually it's more, but theoretically, it only takes one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your edge. Does anybody want to argue with that statement? Now, interestingly enough, no one wants to argue with it. Chances are, and we didn't get a rate. I didn't ask for a show of hands, that there are people in this room who have put on and maybe still, or let's say before this morning, put on trades without predefining the risk. Now I'm going to ask you if you really truly believed that it only takes one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your edge. If you really believe that, would it be possible for you to put on a trade without predefining your risk? Anybody else? I got one no. Anybody else? Yeah. You guys agree or not? See, if you really, now, and this is really what we're talking about here. We're talking about a set of beliefs that create a state of mind. A state of mind that compels you to be consistent, that compels you to do exactly what you need to do when you need to do it, without hesitation, without reservation. If you really believed that it only took one person somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your edge, you would not be capable of putting on a trade without predefining your risk. Because the moment that you started to do it, it would create a conflict. And somehow or another you'd have to argue away the conflict. You'd have to argue away in your mind and justify why you're going to put on this trade, knowing that all it takes is someone somewhere in the world with a different belief about what's high and what's low to make that trade a loser. Are you guys with me on this? How many people in this room have ever played slots? When you put your quarters or dollars in slot machines and you push the button or pull the handle and the numbers didn't come up, tumblers didn't come up in a way that gave you a payout, did you think you were wrong? Why?
Because I accepted the risk.
You accepted the risk, and what else? What other reason? Why?
Next time.
Next time? Okay, and what other
I
reason?
got 2 sevens instead of 3 sevens.
Because I have no control.
Because you have no control? Okay, what other reason? These are good. All good reasons. What? What's that?
You were willing to lose.
That's accepting the risk, but there's another reason.
Didn't expect to win.
No, not necessarily. You expected the winner, you wouldn't put the money in. What else? Yeah, you believe in random outcomes. Your belief in random outcomes prevented you from making the connection about being wrong. You believed that the outcome was random. And therefore, there's no connection. How is it that you think that thousands of people, millions of people on a daily basis can go into a casino and shove money in these machines and not come away, totally emotionally traumatized? If these were traders, they wouldn't be able to do it. If there were traders sitting there with the kind of mentality the traders have sitting in front of these machines, it would be impossible. You guys would be walking away completely traumatized. The reality of trading is that it is a probability game. Because here's if you just break it down to the most fundamental level, what do you have? If you just take the market and break it down to this most fundamental level, what do you have? Buyers and sellers that do what? Create what? Up and down ticks. Right? At the most fundamental level, what we have are buyers and sellers who create up and down ticks. And how do they create their up and down ticks? What has to happen for a tick to go higher than the last or lower than the last? What's that? Volume, but no, what's that? Somebody has to have a stronger belief in the future. Why do we know that for a fact? They want to pay more. In other words, if you look at trading at the most fundamental level, and this is really critical that you understand this. If 9 was the last price, there's only two ways you can make money in trading. You've got to buy low and sell high, or sell high and buy low. Now, if 9 is the last posted price, what's low? 8 is low and 10 is high, right? Now, what does it tell you if someone is willing to actually buy it at 10 instead of buying it at 9 or 8?
They believe it's going to go down.
Yeah, they believe it's going to go to 11, or otherwise they would have waited, right? But what about the guy selling it to him? He also has a belief too. He wouldn't be selling it to him if he didn't think that the next tick was going to be 9 or below. So what you've got is you've got two conflicting and competing forces in every single trade. Both traders are doing it to make money. Both traders believe they are right, or they wouldn't be doing it. But what's the difference? One has to have a stronger conviction in their belief, because they are willing to do the opposite of what they have to do to make money, at least in that moment. The opposite is they are buying high instead of buying low. They are creating movement. They are actually stepping up and creating movement where the guy on the other side of the trade is passive, doing exactly what he thinks he needs to do. He's selling high relative to the last price. So all market movement is simply a function of what, no matter what the reasons are. See, it doesn't really matter what everyone's reasons are for doing all this. It doesn't matter. Because as we already know, most people think they've got good rational reasons. The reality is they're trading randomly anyway, aren't they? So what it all boils down to is all market movement is a function of what traders believe about the future and how convicted they are, how their degree of conviction in their beliefs. Now, all this interaction, all this belief and conviction and the degree of conviction results in simply up and down ticks. Just up and down ticks, okay? Now, what technical analysis has done for us is basically help us recognize that there are patterns in the group dynamics. In other words, you've got a finite number of people who are interacting together day after day, week after week, and they will create behavior patterns. The dynamics here aren't any different than individuals who will respond in exactly the same way under the same conditions or circumstances over and over and over again. Groups do the same thing. They create behavior patterns. So the ticks, so we got individual ticks that form into these larger patterns, and these patterns we have found repeat themselves over and over and over again. Right? And as a result of the way our minds are designed to think, it is natural for us to think that if I can find consistency here, meaning this pattern repeats itself over and over again, that the outcome should also be consistent too, right? Wrong. The outcome will be consistent, wrong to an extent. Well, the outcome will be consistent over a, what? Large sample size of trades. So you've got individual patterns where the patterns themselves can look exactly like the previous one, can measure mathematically exactly like the previous one, but will the outcome be the same as the previous one? And why? And we got people shaking their heads, which is good. Not everyone's shaking their head, agreeing. But the point is, how do we know for a fact that the outcome may not be the same? Because even though, like I said, visually they can look exactly the same and measure exactly the same, there are still always going to be different people involved in this trade. And it only takes one person somewhere in the world to have a different idea to negate the positive outcome of that trade. For example, if you bought that support line. Just one trader, that's all it takes. So what it means is like, it isn't any different than the concept of if I flipped a coin, an evenly weighted coin, 1,000 times, I had 1,000 flip sample set. I will find that each sample set has a relatively even distribution between the number of times heads come up and the number of times tails come up. You with me on this? It'll be close to 50-50. That is a pattern. That's a pattern I can rely on. But within that 1,000 flip sample size, do I know the distribution between the individual heads and tails? In other words, I don't know what the distribution is. I can get 10 heads in a row, I can get 10 tails in a row, I can get 5 heads, 3 tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails. All in all, it's going to come up to 50-50. Casinos. They've got basically a 4% or 4.5% edge in blackjack based on the way they've got the rules set up. That means that of all the hands played, or let's say if there's $1 million wagered on any particular table, they're going to end up with $45,000. That means that takes into consideration all the big winners, all the big losers, everybody in between. Do they fret? They sit there and fret over every single hand that's played? No, they don't. They've learned to think about it appropriately. Go ahead.
Mark, real early in my trading career, I went to a seminar, and the person speaking said to the group, if we flip a coin 20 times, how many of you think there's any chance that we would have, say heads is a winner and tails is a loser, that we would have 12 or more heads or tails in a row? And nobody in the group believed that it was possible. We then proceeded to flip the coins out of the 2014 came of heads in a row.
Oh, yeah, I believe it. Yeah, to me, that's...
Everybody was just astounded.
Right.
Because nobody ever thought, it's like, if you think, can I ever possibly have that many losers in a row? Well, there's proof positive.
Oh, yeah.
Just when you think it won't.
Absolutely. But if you did it flip 1,000 times, you still come up close to 50-50. So now, just based on what I've just said just now, what would that require of us to create consistent results as traders?
Try to find a 50 way to win.
Well, no, you got to have an edge. You've got to have an edge.
Consistently trade.
In other words, yeah, to execute your trades without thinking about the outcome of each individual trade. In other words, every single error, guys, look, and girls here, every single error that's on that list, you cannot make any one of those errors without believing you think you know what's going to happen next. Just take a moment and contemplate what I just said. You can't make any one of those errors without somehow thinking or believing that you know what's going to happen next. And that's why you can't create consistent results if you're not creating consistent results. It's because you're still susceptible to making those errors. And the way you're susceptible to making those errors is because you're susceptible to defining all these R's, these up and down ticks, defining the up and down ticks in some way as potentially painful. In other words, you are taking basically a neutral event that you're observing. And what do I mean by neutral event? What? No, neutral event emotionally. Neutral in the sense that can the environment, let's say, or let me ask you, is the information that the market generates about itself and its potential to move, inherently joyful or painful information? Is it positively or negatively charged information?
Depends on what side.
What's that?
Depends on consumption.
Well, no, I'm asking from the market's perspective. Is the market, the information that the market generates about itself, is it positively or negatively charged? It's neutral, right? Okay, it's neutral. Is there such a thing as positively charged information? No? No, no. Just in the environment. Is there such a thing as positively charged information? Yes, okay. Is there such a thing as negatively charged information? Okay. In other words, people expressing affection and love can be positively charged, right? Or is positively charged. People hurling insults at you is negatively charged, right? Okay, so the market does not generate, as a characteristic of its existence, positive or negatively charged information. If that is the case, then how is it that we can feel fear?
Because we're exactly
Yeah, in other words, somehow or another we've interpreted the information in a way that causes us to feel that way, right? So from the market's perspective, it's neutral. It's the interpretation process that causes us to define it in a way or interpret it in a way where it's potentially painful. And as soon as it becomes potentially painful is when we know what we think is going to happen next. In other words, why am I hesitating? Why am I hesitating? Why am I getting in too late? Why do I do that?
Because I think it's going to be different next.
Yeah, because I think I know, because I don't think it's going to work, right? Why am I hesitating? I don't think it's going to work, and I got to wait. Because I don't remember. I know what's going to happen next, or at least I think that I do. Why am I jumping the gun? I know I'm going to miss out, right? I'm going to miss out. I got to get in now. Why don't I predefine my risk? Yeah, I know I'm right.
I practiced it.
What?
I practiced it for 10 years.
I was worried about the how much time have I got here? 5 minutes? About 9? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Take 10.
Take 10.
I practiced it for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
So I did my walk-forward testing, my analysis is correct, my technical fundamentals. I don't know. I cannot be wrong.
You cannot what?
I cannot be wrong.
You cannot be wrong. Yeah, right. Exactly. See, every single error that we make is always going to be the result of thinking, feeling, or believing I know what's going to happen next. But the problem, as I said before, is that this is only an error. It's only an error within the context of what you're trying to accomplish. Now think about what I just said. These are only errors within the context of what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to accomplish consistency, then these are trading errors. If your objective is not consistency, even though you might say that it is, if the reality of your trading is that it's not consistency, then every single thing that you can do here could result in a winning trade, and it's not an error, obviously, then, is it? If I can hesitate and it ends up in a winning trade, then I did the right thing. If I can jump the gun and I end up in a winning trade, I did the right thing. It's only the accumulation of these errors that cause these massive drawdowns that end up hurting us. Okay, so what we have is the market works the same way in terms of let's say trading works the same way in that we've got patterns, the patterns repeat themselves, but the outcome to each individual pattern is random. And we know that because there are always different participants making up any particular pattern that might look, sound, or feel or measure exactly the same as the last time that it occurred in the market. Which means that there's always a risk. It's just like a number of you people have read Trading in the Zone. Remember the example I used in Trading in the Zone about working with a trader who came to me for consultations, and he was like a really terrific analyst, but he never made money as a trader, and he blew through a bunch of his family's money and his friends and anybody he could talk into opening up an account for him. And so after going through a lot of people's money and a lot of people being pissed off at him, he came to me for help, and I said, hey, look, you've got a number of different issues here that you're going to have to work through that might take, you know, an extended period of time. Why don't you get a job doing something, you know, that someone will pay you for, and you know, and earn your money legitimately. And so he got a job as an analyst for a clearing firm in Chicago. And he, like I said, he was a good analyst, and they paid him really well for it. And so the president of the firm, who was a retired grain trader, never traded, you know, using technical analysis. He was always down in the soybean pit. And, you know, traders, the way traders make money in the pit, especially locals that are you know, they trade, their mentality and the way they trade and how they make money is very, very different than making direction-based decisions off a screen. But anyway, so in fact, it's so different that you almost really couldn't classify the two as being trading. The guys in the pit would say they're traders. The guys on the screen would say they're traders. There's such a vast difference between the two that one of them can't be trading. But anyway, you'd have to call it something else. You'd have to just call it something else. But anyway, so he sat down with the analyst and you know, to learn about this mysterious, you know, technical analysis, and that's exactly what he looked at. It was somewhat mysterious, and you know, the analyst would always talk in real definite terms, very arrogantly, like, okay, this is going to be the high of the day, this is going to be the low of the day. So in one particular day, the market was trading in between what he said was going to be the high, going to be the low, started drifting down to the low, and so the chairman said, hey, you know, so this is going to be the low of the day, right? And he said, yep, that's right, this is the low of the day. So he picked up the phone right next to him with a direct line to the soybean pit and said, you know, sell 2 million bushels at the market. You know, and the soybeans dropped 10 cents in a matter of, you know, like 5 seconds. And the guy's looking like, what the hell happened? Okay, random results. That was the pattern that he was looking at told him that was supposed to be the low of the day. All it takes is one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your edge. Okay, but the reality of trading or thinking in probabilities has to do with 5 fundamental truths about the nature of the market and trading. Make what thing bigger or smaller? I'm not sure what you mean.
It's very close. You know,
Well, the problem is that.
it's not the.
Oh, here we go. Okay, good. I was using this instead of this. Okay.
Mark, you're going. Anytime.
Okay. Now, if the casinos can make money can make consistent money by taking an event that has a random outcome, or each individual event, each individual hand of blackjack has a random outcome in relationship to the last hand. We as traders can do the same thing, but we can only do it if we acquire the appropriate mindset. What I found the appropriate mindset to be is thinking that anything can happen. Not just thinking it, believing it. Believing that at any given moment, anything can happen. That every moment in the market is unique. Now, think about the word unique, about the definition of the word unique. Everyone probably understands or knows the definition of unique, something not like anything else that ever existed. We understand the definition, but to actually believe that every moment is unique can be quite difficult because of the implications. The implications on our current set of beliefs, and as well as the way our minds are designed to think. Remember, our minds are designed to think in association, to link this moment, whatever's occurring right now in this moment, that's similar to something that's already in my brain. Something that's already in my brain as a memory is my past. And if every moment is truly unique, it means that in essence, my mind is not processing information in a way that's consistent with the way reality exists. Because what's going to happen is that, let's say for an example, I've got my edge, and my edge presents itself, and I execute my trades flawlessly for the first 3 trades. And they're all winners. And then the next occurrence of my edge comes up. My mind is designed to think in association, to take what's similar now in the environment. What's similar, because it can't be identical, although it may seem that way. But what's either similar or what we think of as identical, associate it with what's already in my mind, meaning I'm going to associate it with the past 3 trades. They've all been winners. It taps me into a nice, happy feeling. Possibly, again, like a state of euphoria. I might even cross that threshold. I have worked with traders where all it took was one winning trade to flip them into a state of euphoria. One, that's all. Just one winner, and they were flipped into a state of euphoria. And so the way my mind processes information is that I will automatically associate this now moment opportunity with my past, causing me to do what? Possibly make a trading error, right? I can make any number of errors. I can make a money management error. I might even jump the gun, get in too soon, because I think whatever's happening right now, I might miss out on it. Right? Or what if the last 3 trades were losers? Yeah, I probably won't take the trade. Why? Because my mind, the way it processed the information, caused me to enter into a state of mind that told me that this trade is a loser. The fact is, I, at a rational level anyway, do not know what's going to happen next. And the most important thing is I don't have to know to make money. I do not have to know what's going to happen next to make money as a trader. Does a casino have to know what's going to happen next on every single hand of blackjack to make money? Do they have to know what every number is going to come up next whenever the time they spin the roulette wheel? Or someone throws the dice and craps? No, they do not. And nor do we. We don't have to know what's going to happen next. And every time we get into a trade thinking that we do, for whatever reason, we have the potential to make a trading error. And to create these huge drawdowns. Now, again, let's get back to the unique. Every moment is unique. How do we know for a fact that every moment in the environment is really unique? Not just the market, but in our everyday lives. How do we know, let's say, how can we establish that every moment is really unique? Is there any way to really establish it?
We change every moment, right?
Yeah, but I mean, so let's get down to a real fundamental level. How do we know that every moment's really unique? Well, yeah, but how does that make every moment unique? Time. And what's happening over time?
Changes.
But what causes change? Movement, right? Movement over time causes change, meaning that what we know, what we understand and know is that every atom and every molecule spinning around every atom is in constant motion. That's at the most fundamental level. So in essence, for a moment not to be unique, for some moment in time not to be unique, every molecule of every atom would have to be in the exact same position it was in some previous moment. I don't think that's possible. I don't know that it is or it isn't. I mean, I don't know for sure. I just don't think it's possible. And therefore, as a result, it makes it easier for me to believe that every moment's unique. And as a result of believing that every moment's unique, it makes it easier for me to counteract this automatic mechanism in my mind that causes me to process information in a way that tells me that I think I know what's going to happen next, when the reality is I might not. What I think is happening, what's really happening, could be there could be a vast difference between the two. A perfect example would be one in trading in the zone where when I was Many years ago when I was writing The Disciplined Trader, it was like on a Saturday afternoon. I'd been writing all day and I turned on the TV just to take a break, and it was late in the afternoon on a Saturday, and there was some locally produced program in Chicago called Gotcha Chicago. And what they did was just like, they did practical jokes on celebrities, but in this one segment they hired a guy to go out on Michigan Avenue, and they stuffed his pockets full of cash and gave him a sign that said "Free money today only." And his instructions were to give money to anybody who asked for it. That was his instructions. And so he went out on Michigan Avenue with this sign, and they had a film crew out there, hidden so that nobody could see what was happening. And he was, first of all, he was shocked. You could tell he was shocked by the way that he was acting and the look on his face, because he thought that people would just come rushing to him asking for money. And they didn't. As a matter of fact, there were many people who were making a wide path around the guy. Now, if we make some assumptions here, one, that there were any number of people who passed him by that could read the sign. They actually, in fact, could read the sign, "Free money today only." And two, that money is very important to most people. As a matter of fact, maybe under other circumstances, crowds, people can get into a frenzied state of mind and act, act in very bizarre ways if they think money's free. So in essence, in some ways, he might have even been endangering himself and didn't even know it or think about it. So he was getting frustrated by the fact that nobody was asking him for money, and except for one guy. That's right. One guy came up to him and asked him for a quarter for a bus transfer. Okay? And I looked at this guy who's probably a panhandler, because there's a lot of panhandlers in downtown Chicago. So he got frustrated and he walked up to some guy with a briefcase, typical guy's suit and briefcase, and said, "Sir, would you like some money?" And the guy said, "Not today." Really, not today. And he said, "Well, how many days does this happen?" And the guy just walked by him. Now, what does this example tell you about the nature of the way our minds have the potential to process information and the kind of interpretations that we can make? You can always tell what people believe based on their behavior. You can always extrapolate their behavior back to a belief, because it takes energy to express ourselves. Now think about this. There's any number of ways in any given moment that each of us can express ourselves, meaning interact with whatever environmental forces are attendant upon any particular situation. It takes energy to express ourselves, and we will express ourselves in some way that is consistent with what? With what we believe is true in the moment, right? Are you guys with me on this? So if I really got good at this, I could take anybody's outward behavior in relationship to the circumstances and really say, well, this is what they had to believe to behave this way. This is what they had to believe to behave this way. So what can we say about the people that walked by the sign? They didn't believe it. They were operating out of a belief that free money does not exist. And in most cases, it does not. In this particular day, it did. It was real. It was true. Anything can happen. Every moment is unique. And what about the people? So what we have here, and this is what's really critically important for you to understand. I need another one of these. What's the other one? Can't find that other blank one. Oh, here it is. Okay. Consistency is the result of a state of mind. So we have positive, we have negative. In other words, we have degrees of fear and degrees of confidence, okay? Confidence is positive energy, fear is negative energy. And what we want as traders, ideally, is to be in a confident state of mind. A confident, carefree state of mind. without the potential to define and interpret the up and down ticks in any particular painful way. So what we have in this situation with the free money is that every single belief that people were operating out of caused them to tap into a particular state of mind from, let's say, from positive to negative based on their interpretation. So we could say that the guy, the panhandler who asked for a quarter, got exactly what he asked for, and so therefore he was tapped into some degree of a positive state of mind. Right? Now, the people who were actually going out of their way to avoid him, what could we say about their state of mind? Their belief and their state of mind. Negative, some degree of fear. In other words, first of all, let's look at the interpretation. They see the sign clearly says, free money today only. And so the first thing that happens is that their belief that free money doesn't exist acts as a counteracting force against the force of those words, saying, okay, that's not true. They deny the existence of the words, that's not true, and therefore, but this creates a conflict. And our minds don't like to be in a state of conflict or confusion. And so we have to reconcile the conflict in some way. In other words, there is evidence that says that my belief that free money doesn't exist is right here in the environment, where it creates this conflicting force. How do we resolve the conflict? We justify it in some way by saying, okay, since that's not true, this guy must be crazy. And if he's crazy, he might be dangerous. And therefore, as a result, I am going to take a wide berth around him. So as soon as I interpreted that information in a way that caused me to define him as dangerous, it tapped me into some degree of a negative state of mind, okay, because of my fear. Now, let's take a hypothetical situation. Let's say somebody saw the sign and says to themselves, oh, okay, what if? What if? He walks up to the guy and says, okay, give me 20 bucks. Guy pulls out $20 out of his pocket and gives it to him. What's going to happen now? No, not everyone else saw that. Okay, just say that he did it. And what's going to happen to the person that asked for the money? What? No, well, not that he could. Yeah, it's possible.
That whole belief thing.
Yeah, in other words, something has to happen. In other words, his belief about that free money doesn't exist is going to change. Not necessarily. You never know. It's hard. I mean, every circumstance is really different when it comes to this. But the point that I'm making is that his belief that free money doesn't exist will change. They'll draw some of the energy out of it. Maybe not all of it. But this is in essence what we're going to have to do as traders to install those 5 fundamental truths that I had up a moment ago. We're going to have to change the way we think if you want to create consistent results. But I'm going to finish with the example. Hold on one second. Let me finish the example. So what ends up happening is that he's got the 20 bucks in his pocket, and what he's going to do is he's going to end up going back to the office or go home, and virtually everyone, because there's some really powerful implications here. Virtually everyone is going to say the exact same words to whoever it is they encounter, like their spouse or their friends or whatever. You won't believe what happened to me today. But 3 words, you won't believe. And you're right, they probably won't. Because their belief that free money doesn't exist will say, no, that's not true. I don't believe you. And like somebody said before, what could flip him in from, let's say he's walking around in a positive state of mind because he got free money, he got a nice pleasant surprise from the environment, didn't expect it. But what could cause that state of mind to go from positive all the way down to negative? What's that? No, the moment he thinks, or someone says to him, well, why didn't he ask for 100? Why didn't he ask for more?
Cancels out what you're positive.
Yeah, and it flips, missed opportunity. Then flips from positive to negative, missed opportunity. Now see, here's the problem with these negative states of mind. and why these negative states of mind make it virtually impossible for us to create consistent results. It doesn't mean you won't create results. It doesn't mean you won't have winning trades. All I'm saying is that you will always have the potential to create these huge catastrophic drawdowns. And when I say catastrophic drawdowns, because somebody asked me that, like the question in Toronto 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, what's a catastrophic drawdown? Well, I've worked with traders who were multimillionaires, and a catastrophic drawdown for them was, $1,000. They didn't have the tolerance to lose $1,000. So it's different for everybody. But the point that I'm making is that if we're trading with any degree of fear, what ends up happening is that fear as an energy has a very negative effect on our ability to stay objectively focused in the now moment opportunity flow. In other words, fear has the effect of narrowing our focus of attention onto the object of our fear so that we end up creating the very experience we're trying to avoid. So if I'm afraid of being wrong, I'll make myself wrong based on my interpretation of the information. If I'm afraid of losing money, I will cause myself to lose money based on my interpretation of the information. If I'm afraid of missing out, if I'm afraid of leaving money on the table, I will create these very circumstances that I'm trying to avoid. Go ahead.
Why can't we apply that same principle to greed?
To what?
Greed.
You're going to have to...
Fear, we do this for fear. Greed. We believe
Yeah.
to create something that makes us fearful. Why can't we have that for greed? So we have more greed and we can make more money and believe we make more money. Why is
Well, because the problem is because greed is the fear of there not being enough. The underlying fear behind greed is that there won't be enough, and I've got to get mine. And the I got to get mine part, causes us to do things. It causes us to do things that are going to be inappropriate in relationship to what the market's offering in that moment. It's
Greed is actually a form of fear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What else could it be? The only reason why we're greedy is because we think we're not good. It's not going to be there for me. There isn't enough. Okay, wait, look, I lost my train of thought here. I was going to get into something. What was I going to say? Oh, no, yeah, okay. No, I got it. Yeah, here's, see, so what we've got to do here, I just want to give you the example of how fear causes us to narrow our focus of attention. I'll give you a graphic example of what I'm talking about. If I've defined that as support, and I'm operating out of a fear of being wrong, typical trader, we've got 4 fears: being wrong, losing money, missing out, leaving money on the table. Those 4 fears are basically what's going to cause all those errors that we're talking about up there, okay? Now, if I'm operating out of a fear of being wrong, the first thing that's going to happen is that I will not want to predefine my risk, right? Therefore, I will gather whatever evidence is necessary for me to get into that trade to have convinced myself that it's going to work. The reality of the way the market works is that even though this is a pattern, and this pattern reproduces itself over and over and over again, I do not know the outcome of this particular trade because I do not know if the buyers that came into the market here and supported that price and drove it back up, and the buyers that came into the market here and supported that price and drove it back up are going to be here in this moment. They may be out to lunch. Right? Okay? So as a trader, what do I really need to do? All I really need to do is define my risk and say, how much room how much distance do I have to give the market to tell me that the possibility of this trade is so diminished that it's not worth staying in any longer? How much room have I got to give it? There's all kinds of methods that you can use to determine that, but the point is, I'm not going to go through that process if I'm afraid of being wrong. Because I might convince myself not to take the trade. And that's all based on the fact that I'm defining trading as a right or wrong endeavor, not as a probability game, not something that has random outcomes. Which the reality is it has nothing to do with being right or wrong. Just like pulling the handle of a slot machine. You don't feel wrong when the tumblers don't come up. And the reason why is because you have a belief that you're operating out of that it's a random result. And so it doesn't connect it to your feelings of what it means to be wrong. So, what ends up happening? let's say I get in this trade and the market, does something like this. Okay? Now, the market gives us up and down ticks, right? At the most fundamental level, it gives us up and down ticks that form into patterns. If I'm afraid of being wrong, because it has the potential to tap me into the accumulated pain of every time I've been wrong in my life, what am I going to focus my attention on? The upticks or the downticks? The downticks? No, I'm afraid of being wrong. The market's giving me upticks and it's giving me downticks. In this case, it's giving me more downticks than upticks. Let's say on a 4-to-1 ratio. But that doesn't matter because I'm going to take the upticks. I'm going to focus all my attention on the upticks. I'm going to place greater weight, greater significance on the meaning of the upticks in relationship to the downticks. In other words, my fear causes me to narrow my focus of attention in a way that makes the downticks invisible. In other words, we have automatic pain avoidance mechanisms in our mind. Everyone understands the nature of avoiding physical pain. You don't have to think about avoiding physical pain. In other words, this is a hot burner. I don't have to contemplate if I put my hand on it. I don't sit here and I don't weigh and judge or whatever, taking my hand off. It comes off automatically. Everyone understands that. What people typically don't understand is that the environment can offer information pain. Now, we all understand the nature of information pain in that context, but what we don't understand is the mechanism of how our minds will alter our perception of that information in a way that causes us not to have to confront it. And as traders, this is deadly. This mechanism is what causes all the pain. You're trying to avoid something that, in essence, you can avoid it, but it can't be avoided. And the reason why it's so difficult as traders is because in our everyday lives, we can lash out and we can control our environment or other people in ways, if we become effective at it, to cause them not to confront us with this information that we define as painful. And we can get really good at that. The problem is, you can't do anything to stop it, to stop the market from doing it, except control your perception. So, what ends up happening is that we place an inordinate amount of significance on the upticks, on whatever upticks that we might get, to the exclusion of the downticks, to the point where what? At some point, this guy's going to get out of this trade. What do you think that point is? We're talking energy dynamics here. Remember, all we have to do is look at someone's behavior in relationship to the external circumstances, we can tell what they believe. So, what's going on? When is he finally going to get out of this trade? Everyone in this room has experienced this, so you all really ought to know it. I'm sure there isn't one person in this room who hasn't done this.
When it reverses up.
What's that? Yeah, you're going to get out when it reverses up. However, that's true. However, what's the underlying dynamics? Is being wrong the only thing we're afraid of? No, we're also afraid of losing money, right? So we have two fears now. We have two competing fears, where in this case, in the back of our mind is our fear of losing money. But as the market keeps on going further and further down, this fear of losing money starts coming to the forefront of our consciousness until it gets to the point where, let's say, if this represents all the negative energy and a belief of what it means to be wrong, then when the fear of losing $1 more is 1 degree greater than our fear of admitting that we're wrong, we will get out of the trade. You guys with me on this? When the fear of losing $1 more is 1 degree greater than how much energy is in our fear of admitting we're wrong, is when we get out of that trade. And the interesting part about all this is that have I learned, or have you learned, the distinction? In other words, there is a pattern that the market can create called a trend. This is a pretty fundamental pattern, right? And under normal circumstances, I would be able to perceive and recognize when that pattern exists in the market. Interestingly enough, when I'm in this trade, I do not see this as a trend, do I? As a matter of fact, I don't see it till I get out and I hit myself on the head and say, why didn't I just go short? In other words, my fear of being wrong literally blinded me, created what's called perceptual blindness. to the pattern or the opportunity that the market was giving me in that moment. Now, if we just take the opposite, look, instead of this trade being a loser, let's just say the market goes in the guy's favor. Okay? What's going to end up happening here? Is he going to focus on the upticks or the downticks? Downticks. Yeah, who hasn't been in a winning trade where the market came back and took the money, right? So you're operating out of a fear of leaving money on the table, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Because every downtick, that fear that the market is going to take money away will well up, causing us to think that we know what's going to happen next, not recognize, let's say, that we're in an uptrending market and get out of that trade here instead of somewhere up here. And therefore, what ends up happening, of course, we fit the profile of the typical trader where we let our losses run and cut our profits short. And that's all because of the dynamics of the way fear causes us to narrow our focus of attention on the object of our fear, so that we end up creating the very experiences we're trying to avoid. How much more time have I got, by the way? 30 minutes, because I want to make sure that we... So, what we have to do, if we want to create consistency, we have to get to the point where we no longer have any potential to define and interpret what is, in essence, neutrally charged information, or with information without a charge, in any kind of negative way. How are we going to do that?
Is that a question?
Yeah, I'm asking you. How are we going to do it?
That's what, not you.
What's that?
That's what we did now. Redefine your risk.
What?
Redefining your risk.
Well, that doesn't, predefining your risk, I mean, accepting your risk implies, predefining and accepting your risk implies that it's completely reconciled, that there's no other conflicting energy inside of you that would argue otherwise. But the point is that how am I going to get to the point where I have access, because really I'm going to define objectivity. I'm going to define, what I want is I want 100% access to everything I've learned about the nature of the market in any given moment. Remember, I just said that my fear of being wrong caused me not to be able to perceive that as a trend. That's a distinction about the nature of the market. That distinction offers me opportunities to do something. That's part of the opportunity flow in any given moment, telling me what the market's potential is to move in any particular direction. If you look at just the concept of objectivity, is there such a thing as an objective reality? You could say that the only way that two people could actually be experiencing the very same thing in any given moment is if you had simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once. Now think about what I just said. Simultaneous awareness of every distinction that the environment, every possible way that the environment can characteristically express itself, you can perceive. And if I can perceive every possible way, and you can perceive every possible way, you and I are sharing a reality. Up to that point, anything less than that, and we're in our own little world. And there will be times in which we may be sharing a reality with another person, but for the most part, based on our interpretation of the information, it's unique to us. Now, has anybody in this room learned to make every possible distinction in terms of the way the market can express itself? This group dynamics, this group behavior? So in other words, if you shake your head no and you think that, okay, I haven't learned to make every possible distinction in the market's behavior, it means that at any given moment, there's things going on that are invisible to me, right? Because I can't perceive what I don't know. Just like the first time you looked at a price chart, what did you see? You saw lines that had no meaning. You couldn't make any distinction. That's right, you couldn't make any distinction in the nature of those lines, right? Here, I'll give you a good example. Real quick. Here we go. Look at a chart like this. What do you see? You see a bunch of lines, right? Okay. Where's the other one? Oh, here we go. Same chart. Well, just take it away. Same chart. And all those measurements are almost exact, really virtually exact. I didn't fudge on anything there. That's symmetry, those are patterns, okay? But when we first saw these charts, okay, what did we see? Our minds could not make any distinctions at all that represented opportunities. Now, since all of us have learned to read charts to some extent or another, if I can magically reproduce the first chart you've ever looked at and put it before you right now, would you see opportunities in that chart that were completely invisible to you the first time you looked at it? Yeah. Okay. Now, what I'm saying is that all of us have our own objective reality. Meaning that if I've learned to make, let's say, 30% of all the possible distinctions in the market's behavior, in any given moment, I want to have conscious access to all 30%. To whatever degree I'm operating out of fear will diminish that percentage. You with me on this? Every degree I'm operating out of fear starts to diminish the percentage of what I can perceive of what I've learned about what's available, to the point where it can almost get to zero. So if I'm going to create consistent results, I have to find a way to trade in a carefree state of mind without the potential to define and interpret market information as painful. How am I going to do that?
Have to release control, that you have any control over it.
Yeah, how are you going to do that? Ignore what? Ignore outcomes? We're going to have to step into an active process of changing the way we think. Step into an active process of changing the way that we think. To simply think like the casinos think. And in essence, this is what I'm talking about. Because every single one of these beliefs, that every moment is unique, and edge is nothing more than an indication of a higher probability of one thing happening over another. There's a random distribution between wins and losses in any given set of variables that define an edge, and you don't need to know what's going to happen next to make money. Every single one of those statements represent a concept about the nature of the way things work. This is the truth from the market's perspective. The closer that our minds are aligned to this truth, the less fear that we have the potential to operate out of, or the less potential we have to define these up and down ticks in any kind of painful way. Are you guys with me on this? Yes. So how do I get those in my brain unconflicted? How do I do that?
Probabilities and statistics.
Probabilities and statistics?
If you believe in that.
Well,
That's part of your subconscious.
Well, you don't necessarily have to be. I mean, it'll drop down to a subconscious level after a certain point, but it doesn't. No, how to? In other words, you have to learn how to change your beliefs. That's basically what I'm getting at. You have to learn how to think, change the way that you think about things.
So then you have to know how you come up with believing something in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, I mean, we don't have that much time here. I mean, I don't even have that much time left. I mean, this is something that normally takes me a good 2.5 days to get through. I mean, 2.5 days of really intense stuff. But I'm gonna tell you how to do it. And if at least if you go to Trading in the Zone, you can reinforce it there. You could also get I've also got tapes, or you can even come to one of my workshops, which I'm going to be doing one in August in Scottsdale. But if you can't do any of that, at least know that there is a way to do this, and that's simply to set up a trading regimen. Use your trading to acquire skills instead of trading to make money. The money will be a byproduct of the level of skills that you've acquired. And to set up a trading regimen that is specifically designed to learn to believe those 5 fundamental truths. going to say it again, to set up a trading regimen that is specifically designed to do one thing and one thing only, and everything else is not irrelevant but of secondary importance. To believe those at a core level of your trading identity in an unconflicted way. To believe those truths. So how would I do that? It's not that hard, really. I mean, I'm saying it's not that hard to set it up. You might find it hard to do. Might find it very hard to do. Anyway, the way I what's that? Yeah, the way I suggest to do it is to create a mechanical system. Now, is to take, when I say mechanical set of variables, I mean exactly that. Where your entry signals have to be precise. Where there's absolutely no subjectivity whatsoever as to whether or not this signal or this particular edge is present or not. No subjectivity. And your exits have to be precise. As a matter of fact, probably the best way to do this exercise, especially if you guys if you trade electronically and you do it and you trade the E-mini S&Ps or the NASDAQ, is to set up a trading exercise in which you go like 2 for 2 in the S&P, risk 2 to make 2, or 5 for 5 in the NASDAQ. Those are pretty easy parameters to work with. In other words, whatever comes first. So you don't have to make a judgment about where to take profits or where to take losses, for that matter. And also what I suggest, I even set this up in a way where I just use a simple crossing stochastics on a 3-minute chart, like an 11-period stochastics on a 3-minute chart. You can either do it two ways. You can either take every signal, because you might get anywhere from 25 to 30 signals a day, or you can wait for divergence between stochastics and price. When there's a divergence, you just take those right there. So for an example, if you have if the market's going lower and stochastics crosses and you get a little bit of a rally, and then the market makes a lower low, but on the stochastics it makes a higher low, that's price divergence when you connect the lows, then just take that one right there. And what I do in these circumstances, just to set up the exercise, is that I wait for a hard cross. Wait for a hard cross in the stochastics, meaning that when the market's, like on that bar where it's about to cross, the lines can cross and come back depending on whether the market's going up or down. And on the open of the next bar, it'll make a hard cross, meaning that they won't cross again until the actual numbers cause it to cross. So you actually go in on the market on the open of the next bar. So that way it's precise. You got to click as soon as they open. Now, what's the point of this exercise? The point is this. Are you guys clear about that? Okay. It's about the cleanest one I've got here. I only brought 2 of these. Here's what you want to do. You want to set this up in 20 trade sample sizes, between 20 and 30. No matter what particular variables you might use to define an edge, it doesn't matter. Really, the best thing to do is come up with your own set of variables. How good the variables are and how well they work is of secondary importance. If you just paid for commissions with this particular exercise, you would be doing well. If you just paid for commissions. The point is this, is that instead of saying I'm going to take the next trade like what most people do, you're going to say I'm going to take the next 20 trades. You're trading in 20 to 30 trade sample sizes. Meaning what you want is you want a sample size of trade, just like flipping the coin. You want a sample size of trades that's large enough to adequately test your variables so that at the end of the sample size you can say, okay, my results are satisfying, therefore I'm going to take another 20 trades. Or you can say my results are unsatisfying and I'm going to tweak my variables. But you cannot tweak your variables in the middle of a sample size. That is absolutely forbidden for this exercise. And in essence what you're saying is that, okay, I'm going to take the next 20 trades. 20. And what you want to do, in essence what you're going to do with these next 20 trades is you're going to learn, you're going to be training your mind, you're going to be convincing yourself that you don't know what's going to happen next. And that you don't need to know to make money because you don't know the distribution between wins and losses. Even if I gave you a system that in the past produced 70% winning trades, I still couldn't tell you. If I'm going to say I'm going to take the next 10 trades, I can't tell you which 7 are going to be winners and which 3 are going to be losers. I don't know. There's no way I could know. So that in essence, what that requires me to do as a trader, if my objective is to become consistent, is that I have to take every single trade. And I have to do it flawlessly, meaning I have to get to the point where I have flawless execution. And that's something you have to recognize as traders anyway. Analysis does not make you money. Only actual executing a trade can make you money. And so what I want to do is I want to get into these circumstances. I want to get into these circumstances where, let's say, this was a winner, and this was a winner, and this was a loser, this was a loser, and this was a loser. Now I'm on this, now I'm confronted with this sixth trade. And my mind, everything in my mind is telling me, no, that's a loser, I can't take that one. And just do the best you can. Take it, don't take it. But the point is that when you can do, and what I'm saying is that not to avoid these circumstances, when you can step through all these conflicting thoughts, when you can actually take the trade anyway, and that one turns out to be a winner, what you're doing is you're automatically drawing energy out of anything else that's inside your environment that would argue against doing exactly what you need to do when you need to do it. Every time you confront one of these situations and do the appropriate thing, step into it, confront it, and do it anyway. The point is that you will know when you have integrated those 5 fundamental beliefs in your mental environment effectively, when you can do one of these 20 trade sample sizes flawlessly without any conflicting or competing thoughts. You will be a trader, guaranteed. You will be a trader. So if you're going to set this up, set it up in a way that makes it easy on yourself. You don't have to be trading a large amount. You don't have to be trading, you want to do the S&Ps, the NASDAQ, just trade one contract. You don't even have to trade multiple contracts, just trade one. If you trade stocks, trade 10 shares. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't. This is not about making money. It's about creating skills, consciously stepping into a process of creating skills. This isn't any different if you were a golfer, if you're into tennis, if you're in any other kind of endeavor that required certain skills. The difference is the skills are mental. You guys have any questions?
I just have one comment to make. The reason why we don't think logically is because human brain is supposed to think in holistic fashion because of evolution. I know it's kind of personal psychology, but the reason is we don't apply logic outcomes because apparently we were cavemen. We didn't have the luxury of being retrospective, so we took whatever and we didn't go back and practice it. The survival was the key.
Well, think about it this way. If our beliefs were a 100% reflection of the way things existed. Now think about what I'm going to say right now. If our beliefs, if there was a 100% correspondence between what I believed and the way reality existed, what would that imply? That would imply I'd always have my expectations fulfilled. I'd be in a constant state of satisfaction. You guys with me on this? Because what is an expectation? An expectation is simply my mental representation of what the next moment or the next, a minute from now, 5 minutes or whatever, is going to look like in the environment. If the external environment shows up in a way that's consistent with what I expect, then I'm going to be in a state of satisfaction, right? To whatever degree it doesn't show up in a way that I expect, I will be in some degree of emotional pain. That is a universal characteristic of human nature. Everyone wants their expectations fulfilled. But the point is that if like I said, I'll say again, if our beliefs were a 100% reflection of the way reality existed from its perspective, from the environment's perspective, then we would be in a constant state of satisfaction. We'd always be getting what we wanted. Which implies that if we are not, then something's got to change. Now, in a social environment, if we've learned how to exercise control over people and the environment, we'll make the environment look like the way we want it to. There's always consequences to that. You know, there will be, because nobody likes to have to behave in a way that's inconsistent with what they believe. And if there was harmony between my belief and their belief, I wouldn't have to do anything in the first place, correct? The problem is we can't exercise that kind of control over the market. The only thing we can exercise control over is our own beliefs. And to create them in a way that's consistent with the way the market exists. The market exists in a probabilistic way. It's that simple. If our beliefs that we're operating out of are not consistent with that, then we are not going to create consistent results. It's that simple. We'll create random results. And we'll have a lot of fun. And we'll have winning streaks and we'll have winning trades. The problem is we'll always be susceptible to the catastrophic drawdowns. And they take their toll. Go ahead.
Mark, in your experience, it sounds like we got these perceptual filters, that this exercise eventually takes those things away.
Correct.
In harmony with the market.
Correct.
Has it been your experience, or do you think it's to the point that you just get to the point where you just know? I mean, you're so unbiased by anything, that what to do next is just obvious?
You mean, yeah, you mean in other words, you're operating out of a sense of, you know, like an intuitive sense? Yeah, exactly. You're in the zone. In other words, there's complete harmony between you and, you know, your mind, your state of mind, and what the market is offering you in any given moment.
So the market's never trying to hide anything from
No.
you, it's just we put the blind.
That's right. Exactly.
So
Go ahead.
is that obvious then?
Is that obvious? What do you mean, is that obvious? It is obvious when you're in that state of mind. It'll be obvious. And when you start thinking about it is when you'll pop yourself right out of it. So go ahead.
I want to go back to your fishing deal.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of fishing. Sometimes I let Rodney catch fish, which I put the rod in the rod hole, and I don't catch more fish that way than I do try to actually fish. Which brings me to the mechanics of this. If we set up precise entry points, which there's a couple ways of doing that, whether you mechanically get in or you have stopwatch stops to get in. Can you set this up mechanically and let it go on your end? I think I read you on precise entry. I understand that.
It has to be, yeah, precise.
But on your precise exit, that is,
You're better off setting it up where everything's precise. Where, what you don't want is to get yourself into a situation where you can't make a distinction between what's going on in you and what's going on in the market. In other words, if you set everything up, if you set this regimen up in a way so that you know that it's you that's having the conflicting thoughts, it's not some let's say some judgment that you have to make so that you can rationalize away your mistake.
I've done that with stops on stuff. I'm emotionally attached. If it hits a client, that's okay. I've already done that. So on my pre-planning for the trade, then I can actually pre-plan to what I'm going to take the profit, pre-plan my loss, put that in there, and walk away.
That's right. Yeah, if you want to walk away, the best thing to do, look, if you're already evolved enough where you don't have these kind of problems that I'm talking about, you don't have to do it at all. All I'm saying is that if you have the potential to define and interpret market information in any kind of a painful way, then for whatever reason, you probably have to do this exercise. You haven't acquired all the skills that are necessary. Instead of walking away, the best thing to do is actually sit there and watch it, meaning confront whatever it is that needs to be done and do it in that moment, being aware of all the conflicting thoughts. In other words, I'll give you another example. There's a trader I worked with many years ago who owned a couple of construction companies in Texas. He was in his 50s. He was trading bonds. He was losing his ass. He thought, okay, I'm going to go up to Chicago and show these guys something, right? So he bought a seat at the Board of Trade, went into the bond pit, and just got annihilated. You know, so he was having one of his bad days, and someone suggested he come to me for some coaching. And so one of the things that I realized, of course, that he really couldn't even define an edge. And at the time, I was using point and figure analysis, and so I showed him how to define support and resistance within about a 6 or 8 tick point range in the bonds. And so we did this for about 2 weeks, and so it was time for him to go down to the floor and implement what it is that we did. And his instructions were very precise. In other words, if the market was in between, support and resistance, that if it came down to support, he was to execute his trade at a specific price. He was only supposed to risk 3 ticks, which is just about a little less than $100. 3 ticks, and if go 3 ticks against him, he had to get out. If not, and it went in his favor, he waited until it reached resistance. He took his profit and reversed and with the same stop. So the day that he went down there, you know, the market was perfect because it was right in between. It came down to support. As it's coming down, he thinks it's not going to get to his price. He ends up getting in early, like 2 ticks early. It gets to his price where his original entry price in the first place. He thinks it's going to keep on going, and he blows out of the trade for a 2-tick loss. The market reverses, goes back up, does the exact same thing at the top, just completely screwed the whole thing up, right? Now all he had to do was risk $100 in each case. He couldn't do it. He literally could not do it. He did it he did the same thing the second day, the same thing the third day, so he stopped calling me. Because he didn't want, you know, this is the kind of guy, he barks out orders to people, he expects them to do it. He thought he could go down to the floor and do the same thing. He found he didn't have any capacity to do it whatsoever. So in the meantime, he's down there trading for 2 or 3 weeks, and he's getting better and better at defining support and resistance. So the interesting part about what ended up happening is that he would end up waiting till the market hit his price and get in, but he was so afraid that, you know, the market was going to take his money away, he'd end up getting out of the trade for like a 1 or 2 tick profit. Now, what was particularly exasperating for him was that many of these trades, as he went back and looked at his entries, there were many times he had bought the low of the day or sold the high of the day and only ended up with 1 or 2 ticks. So this was like really bothering him. So I didn't hear from him for about 3 weeks. He called me up, explained to me what was happening, and his solution to the problem. His solution to the problem was to go ahead and up his size up to about 20 or 25 contracts. So, hey, makes sense, right? The problem with upping his size, so see, instead of you know, learning how to hold on to his trades, okay, he's going to up his size and get the money, right? Well, the problem with upping your size is that you go from a 1-lot trader in the bond pit to a 20-lot trader. You're dealing with a completely different set of guys. You know, there's all kinds of problems with that. Anyway, I knew he was gonna really, you know, it was a disaster. And I knew it. I didn't say anything to him. I thought, hey, just let him, you know, he's going to do it anyway. What difference does it make? So he did. He called me up. He lost all the money he'd made in the last 3 weeks, plus a bunch more. He said, okay, here's the key. I am ready to do anything. Okay? He was ready to do anything. And he was. He sincerely was. So I gave him an exercise. A real simple exercise. Very similar to what I just gave you guys. And this exercise worked great for him. He had to do the exact same thing as before. The only difference is that when he got that trade on, he had to put his hands in his pocket, turn and look at the clock on the wall and be in agony for as long as he could. He had to put his hands in his pocket and look at the clock, and here were the parameters. The market either stopped him out, or he had to stay in it for 20 minutes, whatever came first, or it reached his objective. 20 minutes, and the longer, and the first couple of times he, you know, I don't remember, but it's probably only a minute or two that he could stay in the trade. But he worked his way. He was very diligent about it. He worked his way up to the point where he could turn around and look at the clock and face each agonizing second until it wasn't agonizing anymore. And then he went on to make quite a bit of money trading. So the point is of that story is that don't walk away from it. If there's conflicts, stay with them. In other words, be with it. Embrace it.
That's so fun.
What?
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, you know, hey, depends on how bad you want the skills. Go ahead.
I have read somewhere, quite a number of places actually, where someone has a trading system.
Oh, what? A trading system?
That's so good. Like, never had a single loss trades in 30 trades. Is this person behaving from your philosophy, or he has an edge that we don't know about? And what would that?
That would be hard for me to answer. It is very possible for someone to have winning streaks of 30 or 40 trades in a row. That's not that unusual. It really isn't. I know it may seem like it, but it really isn't.
But it's not a function of understanding the dynamics of the market.
It's a function of both. What it is that when you've got the appropriate mindset, that's when you can utilize your technical abilities to their fullest potential. Okay? It isn't the other way around. Learning about the market's not going to give you this mindset, guys. It just isn't. If you think learning about technical analysis is going to give you the mindset we're talking about, you are down. You are headed. You're either on the path or headed down the path of ultimate exasperation. It isn't going to work.
If this is about human reaction, then what is better? Is it better to just buy a system that exists, which many have tremendous track records, and leave it with the broker and let him trade that amount of money? Or is it better to trade that same amount of dollars if the human factor is...
I can't answer what you think is better, because it has to be within the context of what you're trying to accomplish.
End result.
Still, you have to say, what are you trying to accomplish? If what you're trying to accomplish is just to acquire profits and you don't want to trade, then give it to somebody else to do. That's, the question really answers itself. Just put it within the context of what you're trying to accomplish. Put everything within the context of what you're trying to accomplish. What's your objective?
To make more money.
Then do it whatever way is satisfying to you. Do it in a way that's most satisfying to you, whatever that is. And only you can determine that. The man says I got 3 minutes. Anybody else? If not, we can end 3 minutes early. I can take a break. Are we all done? Okay. Let's go.